Okay, Chapter 5, Part 1. My computer is crashing right now, so I'm hoping to get through this. So we're in Part 2 of the book. Our book is cut up into different sections. Part 1 was Chapter 1 through 4 on kind of our basics, building blocks. Most of the rest of the book is Part 2, Why Do We Make Art? And our author's approaching this from a bunch of different directions. Kind of a unique book, by the way, just the way she goes about it. We're in survival. It's not called Survival Beyond. It's called Food and Shelter, but it's kind of about survival, your basics, and then we'll get into reproduction, sexuality, deities, places of worship, mortality, immortality, and so on. And then the last section that she just added, part 3, has only got one chapter in it, and we are using it. By the way, we're doing the whole book. There are a lot of images, so I'm going to say that in my defense in using this entire book. But I think that it's cohesive and it makes the most sense when you use this whole book the way she's set this up. All right, so food and shelter. When we look at ancient works, and this one is, as far as we know, about 17,000 years old. We're not 100% sure, on dates and times. And anymore, we're not as sure as we used to be on meaning. So the meaning for this could be that it's a ritual hunt location, like right before the hunt, everybody gather together and get psyched up and go off to the hunt. Or it could be that, it's a learning tool. It could be that they actually worship these animals. We really don't know because so much time has passed and those particular people with their culture is gone. So we can only theorize, right? But these are found in caves. We find more of these all the time, beautifully drawn. And this one's the Hall of Bulls in France. And for some reason, just because the geography of France, the way that the the caves are constructed and the humidity, or they got sealed off or what have you, it maintained these drawings really well. And these are pigments such as charcoal and could be animal colorants, vegetable colorants, minerals, that kind of thing. But it's usually like a plant, like a blueberry makes a blue, that kind of thing, or an earth pigment. Earth pigments would be the longest lasting, so charcoal, earth pigment with a little bit of animal fat and saliva. That's usually how these were attached to the walls or drawn on the walls or painted. We don't know exactly. Okay, so there's these beautiful drawings of looking like cattle, some kind of a herd of animals. And again, we think that they could also be doing things, not this particular one, but like an image of clouds would be trying to bring rain. You really have to take your mind back when you think about works like this, and really works up until about, 200-300 years ago, where there's no electricity, there's no predictability, there's no weatherman, there's no lights after dark other than fire. Sorry. That when you're waiting for rain to come for your crop to grow, you're very concerned and you're worried and you don't know what's going to happen next. So that is why you focus on these things, and that is why most of the artwork on a primary level, on a primal level, is focused on these things. Also, fertility is another one. Okay, there's another beautiful one from Africa. And this one is about 4,000 years old. So these are Paleolithic hunters and gatherers that eventually became farmers. So when we think about herds of animals, now we're looking like they're more orderly or more organized, if you will. There's a guy sitting. So they're not necessarily hunting these animals. And if you look at these closely, they do kind of look like even modern day cows with these sort of brown spots, white with a little bit of brown, that kind of thing. So this is what we're used to looking at in terms of modern day cows. Our cattle that we have in the US and in the New World, North and South America, all came originally from the Middle East. Everything came from the Middle East. So the Middle East, then to Europe, and then from Europe into the New World. Okay, so this isn't exactly following that timeline. We're in Northern Africa, but it has traveled from the Middle East, and they have these cattle, and they're becoming farmers. Australia, this is a very different visual look to this work. It's not representational, it's highly abstract. But this is the Witchetty Grub Dreaming piece, and this person, Patty Carroll. So it's kind of interesting, and I don't even know how to pronounce the last name. It's like the first two names, these are very Irish names, and then you have an Aboriginal name. So this person is probably a mixture of both, and I think it's a really amazing name. So these are Aboriginal paintings, and these are done with sand and traditionally, but this one's done in paint. Okay, and these are sold or it is a traditional work, but more and more these are sold. Artists like any other artist would put this in a gallery, but this is very similar to Navajo sand painting and also Tibetan um, sand painting in that you would make up a map of the cosmos and the idea about the belief system. So in the middle here we have the main grub that is a food source. Sorry, this images repeat, and I always have to check. So the main grub is in the center. Now grub is in a larvae of an insect, not something we would think about eating necessarily, but in many cultures, including Africa and Australia, in the Aboriginal culture, grubs are an important food source, high protein content. You kind of think about it as like eggs, eating an egg, only this is an insect egg, if you will. Not quite, but same concept. And they also contain a lot of water. So as they're moving outward, there's these grubs. You see those little sort of wiggly things. It's sort of a map in the sense that here's where the food is, or here's how to move forward. And it's said that the elders would know exactly where these grubs would be if they were to walk through the desert. The outback in Australia is even more extreme than our deserts in some ways. The expanses and the distance are longer, and there's no oases of water. So these would be a good food and water source. And they also would find these toads that were full of water, and that basically drink the toad, if you will. So that was important for them to know where the food source would be. Okay, so we're switching gears here a little bit and going to Mali. And Mali has so many interesting and beautiful traditions. This particular one is um, these antelopes, and you see this one. It took me a moment to see this. So there's sort of like a parent antelope, and then there's sort of the child antelope, the smaller one right there. And just the costumes are just so gorgeous when you think about this. These are male dancers with their costumes, and they're performing sort of the leaping moment of the antelope dancing. And this is about the mythical antelope, which first gave humans a knowledge of agriculture. And it's about plant life, it's about crops, and it's about antelope, both food sources, and about the ancestors and sort of combining them in this ritual dance. Okay, so when I've talked a little bit about this, these objects often are transported into like a European museum, but really they are very powerful objects, much like we would think of religious objects to them, where when they're dancing it into its power. It's sort of if you would, like a lightning rod to bring down the power of their god into them and into their culture, into their communities, so that um, they were able to ensure their crops. All right, this is a really frightening looking piece. I know it's a little bit intense. Our author really likes to switch around cultures and context quite a bit here, and I sometimes find it a little bit jarring. In this particular case, I think this is our most extreme one in the book. So this is a watercolor and graphite on paper, 22 by 30 inches, from Sue Co. in England, 1987. You think about kind of the height in the 80s of shocking, oh gosh, imagery as much as possible to make a point, right? So this person's a vegetarian, and she's pushing forward the idea that we're not in touch with our hunting culture anymore. We're just processing animals. It's very negative. It's very yeah, inhuman. Like even the humans in here aren't very feeling or kind. And look at him, he's kind of smirking, and his face is even pig-like. But the idea of processing hogs, very negative connotation to that because they are cooked or sorry, processed and killed in an industrial type way, as opposed to a more natural